excited. You all, there it is, recording in progress. So just wanted to let you all know. And thank you for joining us and welcome to the nationwide Mississippi River Town Hall. I'm really glad to be here in community with you all. My name is Michael Anderson. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Manager for the Mississippi River Network. I'm based near Bedote, or the confluence area of the Minnesota and the Mississippi Rivers here in Minneapolis, the homeland of the Dakota and Ojibwe people. Like many of you, I consider myself a student of the river. And in fact, in 2010, the Mississippi saved my life. It's a true story, but definitely a story for another time. And nowadays, to quote one of my mentors, John Ruskey, I offer my energy as a worker bee in service to our queen, the Mississippi River. So in this lifetime, I intend on canoeing and kayaking all the rivers of the Mississippi River watershed. We're talking 20,000 plus river miles, and all things willing, we will keep working on that goal. To date, I've logged about 3,000 miles and removed over 7,000 pounds of trash by hand and by boat. By the way, did you know bowling balls float? True story. And if you have a short story or a short memory about the river that you'd like to share, feel free to go ahead and share that in the chat. And so I was a wilderness guide for many years and a river educator. And so it feels familiar to be here today in community with you all as a sort of guide or MC for tonight's celebration. As I mentioned, I work for the Mississippi River Network, or MRN. And for new friends who aren't familiar with our work, MRN is a coalition of nearly 60 nonprofit organizations and businesses working together to protect the land, people, water, and wildlife of our greatest river, the Mississippi. MRN implements the only national public program of its kind dedicated to the river. That's called the One Mississippi program. One Mississippi is a national public program designed to educate, engage, and inspire residents to take action to protect the Mississippi River. By signing up as river citizens, people show their commitment to the river and agree to take action on its behalf. So since 2009, the program, the One Mississippi program, has recruited 20,000 river citizens and inspired thousands of actions. Some of you on this meeting tonight might be river citizens yourself. Thank you all for being here. And so you might be wondering, what's a river citizen? So river citizens are people who want to clean up and protect our country's greatest river. Whether in armchairs or wading boots, river citizens protect the river by speaking up on its behalf and caring for it in simple ways that make a big difference. Together, we can protect the river for future generations. So take the first step, sign up as a river citizen today at onemississippi.org. The nationwide Mississippi River Town Hall kicks off the network's 10 days called River Days of Action series. It starts today and it continues until June 20th. We're glad you're here with us and hope you'll check out the other 40 plus events happening in person and virtually over the next 10 days from Headwaters to Gulf and all across the country. You can find the full event schedule at onemississippi.org. Tonight, we'll hear from many inspiring and engaging Mississippi River leaders. We will all have the opportunity to make our voices heard through a public petition that will launch tonight as part of this town hall event. So without further ado, I am delighted to share video remarks sent in just for us and for this event from a few inspiring and influential Mississippi River enthusiasts. Enjoy.
Fourth Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives. And I'm happy to be with all of you today to celebrate a new vision for a river that's near and dear to my heart, and I know it is to yours too. I'm inviting you to take action to protect the mighty Mississippi River. First of all, I know you're here because you do care about the river, and you're already working to protect it and the communities who depend upon it. And for that, I want to give you a big thank you. Like you, I know the Mississippi River provides so much for our communities. The river is a source of drinking water for millions of Americans. It's important to our economy because it provides essential habitat for endangered species, which also does recreation, but it's also a great working river. But we all know it's a river at risk. Pollution runoff has drastically reduced water quality and has harmed aquatic life throughout the entire river system. Changes to the river in the floodplains have left many communities vulnerable to floods, hurricanes, and other storms. It then impacts livelihoods, and it also leads to increased costs in keeping our communities safe. Aquatic invasive species threaten our ecosystem, the fisheries, and the recreational industries that all depend upon them. Further downstream, the Gulf Delta, its marshes and its swamps and its barrier islands, while they're continuing to lose ground. While the annual dead zone, or the hypoxia zone as it's called, creates terrible consequences for our environment and for our economy. But fortunately, there are models we can turn to that have successfully started to reverse some of these trends in other natural places of significance. Think about it. The Everglades, Puget Sound, Chesapeake Bay, and our Great Lakes have all dedicated federal funding programs devoted to protect and to restore these incredible natural resources. These special, geographically based funding programs allow us to better coordinate state and federal efforts by increasing participation and funding at all levels, including states, tribes, local governments, and yes, local nonprofits. Working together, we know we can solve the challenges that we are all facing. And that's why I believe it's time for the Mississippi River, and you do too, to have a program of its own. The Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Initiative. We're going to call it MRRRI. MRRRI will provide the much needed resources to coordinate throughout the river states so that together we can protect and restore America's great river. And I'm proud to work with the MRRRI collaborative partners across the nation to introduce and advance MRRRI legislation in Congress. But we can't do this alone. We need you to help us. So please contact your member of Congress. Let them know that you share our vision for a healthy, resilient Mississippi River. Working together, we can establish MRRRI and ensure that our great river receives the investment it deserves, not only for today, but for future generations. So thank you, and I look forward to working with you. All the best.
I'm LaToya Cantrell, Mayor of the City of New Orleans. And like you, I understand that the Mississippi River links our geography, culture, and our economy. The river is critical, especially to the sustainability of our coast. And that coast protects us all. The river connects us all, and so should our river policies. Louisiana has recognized the seriousness of our coastline and our loss, and we prioritize restoration and protection. The Mississippi River is important to our economy, and we know investing in the river is money well spent, and the time is now. The Mississippi generates nearly $500 billion in annual revenue and directly supports the employment of over 1.5 million people. The river provides drinking water for more than 20 million people in 50 cities. The Mississippi River has long been a vital transportation corridor. Tens of millions of people live in and around the river. Restoring the river will not only protect our communities from natural disasters, but will also bring thousands of jobs and billions of dollars our way, impacting our economy and our region. Our best shot at maintaining our coastal buffer is right now, and it is making sure that we sustain the future of New Orleans and our Delta. So thank you so much, and let's do what's necessary to protect and enhance our river.
As Langston Hughes famously wrote, I have known rivers, but especially the Mississippi River. I have been up the MRRRI and down the Shannon, across the Amazon, 10 days on the Congo, and I've been to the sources of the Nile. But none of those great rivers has captured my imagination the way the Mississippi River has. It got under my skin when I was a small boy growing up in St. Louis, too young to realize that the burdens the Mississippi carries are more than barges loaded with grain and coal, that the river carries as well sins and salvation and dreams and adventure and destiny. As a boy, I would go down to the river almost every day with my mother after she had dropped my father off at work. And she and I would sit and watch the arch going up, and we would watch the river lumber down to New Orleans and to the Gulf of Mexico. As a child, I feared and respected the river more than I feared God. As an adult now, having canoed the river twice, I fear it even more. The river took hold of my dreams and never let go, and ultimately became part of my destiny. I would not be who I am, or where I am, probably how I am, and possibly I would not have done the things I have allowed myself to do if I had not allowed myself one crazy, frosty morning in late autumn to take a canoe to northern Minnesota and put that canoe into the headwaters of the Mississippi. What I did not know as a boy, and maybe what I did not know as I started my journey, was that there is more than one Mississippi. Physically, of course, there is the upper Mississippi, which is totally different from the lower Mississippi, with the addition of the Illinois and the Missouri and the Ohio. And with each addition, the river changing colors and character, becoming more and more the old man river of myth and fable, known the world over. And of course, there are the headwaters, which are as pristine and beautiful as any place. And I knew nothing of those until I went there. Old Man River, cultural and commercial highway, river of dreams, and now river of destiny, and the river of jumping Asian carp, potentially a huge environmental disaster. We should pay more attention, and we should be more careful. But the river that holds me now is the river of destiny, my own personal destiny, of course, but also the destiny of the country and how different the country is when seen from the river and not through the lens of the TV news cameras. I don't know if there's a difference between people you meet on the river and people you meet elsewhere in travel. I have met people in all sorts of situations, all sorts of places, and much kindness has been shown to me. But something a little special happens when people meet along the river, as if we share something. Even though I'm only passing through, the same as I would be if I were in a car or on a motorcycle. Maybe because the travel is a little slow. Maybe it feels like I'm part of something that they are part of, that we share something more than the moment. I don't mean to suggest that any part of the country is any realer than any other part of the country. But it feels somehow that along the river we strip down to an essential sharing. And what is a country but something shared, shared values, shared history, a shared way of seeing? I'm convinced that if you really want to know these United States and all of our story, all of our history, then you must come to the river and know it, as I have done. The river, in so many ways, tells us who we are and who we were and who we are becoming.
Wow. I don't know about you all, but I'm energized to take action to protect our Mississippi River and all the communities that depend on it. So, do you support a new vision for the Mississippi River? I know I do. Let's check in with some of our friends in St. Louis, Eddy Harris's hometown, who are gathered here to watch this town hall and see what they're thinking so far. Are you there, St. Louis?
Hi, everyone. This is the St. Louis watch party for the nationwide Mississippi River Town Hall. My name is Maisa Khan. I'm the policy director with the Mississippi River Network. We have so many amazing river enthusiasts here. I just want to shout out a few of our MRN network member organizations who are present in person with us. We have the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators and our Missouri state legislators who are here. Raise your hand. Woo! We also have American Rivers in the house, Olivia Dorothy. We have the Piasa Palisades group of the Sierra Club. There's Christine. We have the National Great Rivers Research and Education Center, NGREC. Where are my NGREC friends at? Oh, over there. Awesome. We have the Missouri Coalition for the Environment in the house. Yay! We have the Mississippi Valley Traveler, also known as Dean Klinkenberg. We have the Mississippi River Water Trails Association. Did I miss anybody? Did I miss any of our network members? The Heartlands Conservancy. Yes, and we have a special guest from Iowa. The Iowa Environmental Council is also in the house. There's Ingrid way back there. Anyhow, we're excited to be here with you all virtually and in person for some of us. So thank you, Michael.
Wonderful. Thank you, St. Louis, and thank you all for being here tonight. We know that your presence here means that you already care about the river. All right, so you heard it from Congresswoman Betty McCollum, and I can feel the energy from St. Louis. We're thrilled to launch a public petition tonight so you can make your voice heard. The question we're asking the river community tonight is, do you support a new vision for our Mississippi River that focuses on restoration, resilience, and equity? If the answer is yes, please take a moment now to sign the action that is weaving all of these River Days of Action events together, and that is the public petition. Rebecca has just pulled up on the screen. Thanks, Rebecca. The 3 ways that you can sign this public petition. First, you can visit the public petition short link, which I can see Matt Rhoda is about to share in the chat. Another way is you can pull out your smartphone, whether you're sitting at home or you're in St. Louis at the watch party or another watch party around the country, open up the camera, point it at this QR code, which is this, sort of log jam, if you will, of black and white squares on your screen. And when you do that, you should see a clickable link that will appear. Tap that link and it will open the petition webpage. Alternatively, just cruise over to onemississippi.org and check out the River Days of Action webpage where the petition is now live as well. And since I cannot see anyone, I'm assuming that everyone is busy right now getting after this petition, making your voice heard, taking action to restore our resilient Mississippi River. And as you'll see in the petition text, by signing this petition, you are supporting a new vision for the Mississippi River that focuses on restoration, resilience, and equity. This new vision works in 4 areas. Number 1, improving water quality. Number 2, restoring habitat and natural systems. Number 3, eliminating aquatic invasive species. And number 4, building local resilience to natural disasters. All while prioritizing investments in communities of color and economically disadvantaged communities along our river. So spend some time, read through the petition, and we'll learn a lot more about this new vision for the river in the second half of our program tonight. So if you're curious to learn a little bit more before you sign, that's perfectly okay too. We're glad you're here, and we're about to be entertained and informed much more about this petition and the new vision for the river that is MRRRI. So before we move on to our second half of our programming tonight, I'll pause now, let everyone who would like to take a minute to access the petition, read and sign. Otherwise, just feel free, a little quick stretch break, settle in. Maybe you have a glass of water by you, right? Give thanks to the water. Wonderful. All right, we'll continue on. Rebecca, please, to the next slide. So thank you all for taking the time to make your voice heard about the river. If you've already signed the petition, thank you, thank you, thank you. And so far tonight, we've heard from river enthusiasts like you who care about our beautiful and mighty Mississippi River. Now it's my pleasure to introduce 3 speakers from 3 different organizations who are working collaboratively with Congresswoman McCollum's team to bring her new vision to reality. Here with us tonight are Whitney Clark. Whitney is the Executive Director for Friends of the Mississippi River, or FMR, an MRN member organization based in Minnesota. Matt Rhoda. Matt is the Senior Policy Director at Healthy Golf, an MRN member organization based out of Louisiana. And Alana Rubin. Alana is the Program Manager for Water Resources at the National Wildlife Federation, or NWF, whom is also an MRN member organization. So thank you for speaking to us today, Alana, Matt, and Whitney. Together, they will be sharing just a little bit more info about the vision from Congresswoman McCollum and how their organizations are working to make that vision a reality. Whitney, over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Michael. And it's so good to be with you all tonight. It's great to see a good turnout here up from our friends up and down the river. As we heard in Congresswoman McCollum's remarks tonight, and as you'll see in the public petition, we think it's time for a new vision for the Mississippi River that focuses on restoration, resilience, and equity. I'm participating tonight from St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm from the Twin Cities. I was born on the banks of the river in Minneapolis. And it feels like my hometown river. My dad grew up in Bemidji, Minnesota, near the headwaters. My mom is from St. Louis. They met each other while studying at the University of Minnesota, literally a campus that straddles the Mississippi River in Minneapolis. And so I have been exploring the bluffs and the banks and the backwaters of the Mississippi River since I was a wee lad, and it feels great to be advancing this legislation and telling you about it tonight. My organization, Friends of the Mississippi River, or FMR, has been working with many other organizations up and down the river to bring a new vision to reality through the Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Initiative. We're calling it MRRRI for short, because that gets to be a lot of syllables to say over and over. As mentioned earlier in the program tonight, MRRRI is a concept that's modeled around the success of existing initiatives like the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. As you've heard, it's a vision put forward and championed by Congresswoman Betty McCollum from Minnesota's 4th Congressional District, which is based right here in St. Paul. At its heart, MRRRI is a restoration program. It seeks to restore the habitats and natural processes that contribute to the river's resilient nature. It'll restore the kinds of things the river needs for us to all to enjoy it. Whether you like to canoe or kayak on the river, enjoy fishing or bird watching, the river is a flyway for about 60% of North American birds, or benefit from living in an economically thriving river city. So now I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to step through some of the specific policy components of MRRRI. MRRRI will be a federal funding program. The goal is to secure $300 to $350 million per year in federal funding that would then come back to all of our 10 main stem river states through grants and partnerships. As is the case with the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, MRRRI is not a regulatory program. This means that MRRRI would not create any new federal, state, or local policies or regulations or be used to enforce those regulations. It'll also be a voluntary program. That means that an entity will decide to opt in to receive funds or to apply for funds. For example, we envision entities like state, local and regional governments, tribal governments, nonprofit organizations, and others to apply for MRRRI funds in all 10 states. The river's watershed is, of course, tremendous. All or part of 31 states and 2 Canadian provinces drain into the Mississippi River. And that's about 41% of the contiguous United States. And the Mississippi River Basin accounts for about 90% of the freshwater flow to the Gulf of Mexico. So MRRRI takes a holistic view of the river. MRRRI funding would be available for programs and projects within the watershed of the Mississippi and its tributaries within the 10 states and tribal nations that border the river, or what we call the 10 main stem states of the Mississippi River. MRRRI has 4 focus areas. The Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, will be the lead federal agency, as they are with the other geographic programs around the country. The EPA will coordinate MRRRI, but will work closely with other federal agencies as well as with state and local partners. States play a big role in managing the health of the river, and so it will be a very integrated effort. MRRRI is going to create the first ever Mississippi River National Program Office that will be housed within the EPA. And MRRRI funds will support actions or projects that will restore clean water, that will protect and restore river habitat, that will rebuild natural infrastructure and improve river delta health, and reduce the impact of aquatic invasive species. So let's imagine that MRRRI legislation has passed and it's now law. What kinds of activities could be funded in these 4 areas? I'll briefly go over the kinds of investments and projects that we might expect to be funded under MRRRI. To improve water quality in the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, MRRRI would fund actions that reduce polluted runoff, excess nutrients, and sediment. There are 2 main buckets of clean water funding in the MRRRI vision. The first is urban runoff. This includes actions that prevent urban stormwater pollution or reduce what are called combined sewer overflow events, where raw sewage is discharged to surface waters through storm sewers. And the second would be addressing cropland runoff. So this would be investments in programs that conserve and protect lands that play a significant role in water pollution, that promote soil health initiatives that help croplands retain water and filter out pollutants that would otherwise flow to the river, and actions that promote landscape scale vegetative cover, including perennial grains, perennial woody crops, winter annual cover crops, perennial pasture, and other approaches to maintain year-round vegetative cover on the agricultural landscape. Now, there are some things that MRRRI would not fund, and in this category are funding of wastewater treatment plants, spills or general Superfund cleanup costs, but it could be used to clean up legacy contamination that wouldn't otherwise be funded through the Superfund program. The second focus area is habitat restoration. This is about restoring river life. So MRRRI will protect and restore wildlife habitat along the river itself by funding work to protect and restore the river's ecological functions and processes. So this includes programs that would restore riparian and floodplain wetlands, support in-stream habitats, including reconnecting side channels and backwaters, and supporting bluffland and upland habitat and living shorelines along the river and its key tributaries in the watershed. Third focus area is natural infrastructure. To help reduce flood and storm risks and protect the Delta, the third area that MRRRI would fund is innovative natural infrastructure projects. This includes investments that strategically restore the river's access to its floodplain, including modifying or removing levees, dams, and culverts that impair natural river hydrology, protecting floodplain lands through acquisition or voluntary easements, relocating, removing, or cleaning up flood-prone structures to restore floodplain access and minimize public costs. It will also help cover the cost of transporting responsibly sourced and cleaned dredged sediment to better aid with river floodplain and river delta restoration. Finally, MRRRI will reduce the impact of aquatic invasive species by funding actions that control, manage, or eradicate non-native invasive aquatic species. So this would include research, funding deterrence, and commercial harvesting of invasive carp species, as well as other aquatic invasive species like these zebra mussels that you see here. MRRRI would also fund the reintroduction of native fish, mussels, and other aquatic species because a healthy, functioning ecosystem is the best way to repel invasive species in many cases. So that is a brief description of what MRRRI would do. I hope it's as exciting to you as it is to us. I have been doing this work for most of my adult life. I've been at Friends of the Mississippi River for 24 years now. And I think if we can get this bill passed, it might be the most transformative single action that I've been involved with in my career. So I'm very excited about it, and I hope you are too. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Matt to talk a little bit more about what implementation steps might need to be put in place to turn these visions into projects on the ground. So Matt in Louisiana, take it away.
Thanks, Whitney. Thanks for having me. And this is, like Whitney said, this is super exciting. Like everybody on this panel, everybody that's attending here, I have a very special relationship with the Mississippi River. I grew up near the river, up on the bluffs above the Mississippi River in Illinois. I've lived down in New Orleans. I've been down here for 15 years. Like I mentioned in the chat, one of my formative memories is helping to sandbag Valmeyer, Illinois during the massive Mississippi River floods in 1993, and just witnessing firsthand both the power of the river and also what's potentially some of our mismanagement of this river has done. And so I think MRRRI is just super exciting for me to see and be able to see some projects moving forward. And so Whitney spoke about some projects that we can imagine, but now how will MRRRI actually decide which projects to fund and where? How will the funding areas be shaped and implemented over the long term? Well, that will be up to us because projects are more effective when all river voices have a seat at the planning table. Before any MRRRI funds are invested, we will all need to come together to shape this initiative through a 2-year EPA-led public process to develop the MRRRI action plan. So when it's time for us to identify the priority projects and build this action plan, we'll be sure to reach out to you and to other river citizens and other people that are interested to encourage your participation again. To ensure an evidence-based approach, MRRRI's science plan will also be developed. The first step for this is to create a new National Mississippi River Corridor Research Center housed within the United States Geologic Survey, also known as the USGS, which would have 3 regional centers based out of 3 host universities. And once these research centers are up and running, federal, state, and tribal partners, academic institutions, and other interested stakeholders could share current science, identify data gaps and areas of concern, and then prioritize the next steps in the MRRRI science plan. This science plan would be incorporated into the MRRRI action plan and would likewise be updated periodically. So that's a very brief overview of the nuts and bolts of what MRRRI is. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Alana to talk more about how we are working to center justice and equity in this initiative.
Great, thank you, Matt. So I'm Alana with National Wildlife Federation, and I'm not one of the many people here who lives along or in the watershed of the Mississippi River, but it's still so important for supporting the entire country and the world because we're all connected. So we know it supports hundreds of species of wildlife, so much of our economy. I'm over here in Virginia, but I think about how I'm right on the Potomac River, and that connects into the Chesapeake Bay, and that goes to the Atlantic Ocean, and so does the Mississippi River. So ultimately, we're still all connected through the water and so many different ways. So just like Matt said, I'm going to share a little bit more about how we're working on environmental justice and equity issues in the Mississippi River corridor. As many of you know, many folks likely have firsthand lived experience with this. Neither the benefits nor the burdens brought by the Mississippi River are equitably shared. And we do know that too often the voices of those who are most impacted by environmental decisions are often excluded or ignored in the making of those decisions. So knowing that, I want to share with you about our work to promote equity and justice in two tracks. One's internally within the MRRRI Collaborative, and the other is what we expect to see within MRRRI legislation itself. I will also say that we know that centering equity and justice is an ongoing journey. It's not a destination, and we know we'll always have work to do. That's both, for me as an individual, other folks as individuals, as organizations, as a collaborative. And so we are grateful to hear from all of you, whether that's now, later tonight, tomorrow, in the months and years to come in MRRRI's lifetime. Share with us about how our equity and justice work can continue to evolve and grow. Now let's take a look at how we are working on equity internally in the MRRRI Collaborative. We've got a few committees of folks that are involved with the collaborative, and one of these is the Equity and Environmental Justice Committee. And this committee provides guidance and support alongside the steering committee and campaign committee. Currently, the Equity and Environmental Justice Committee includes folks from a few different organizations. That's Freshwater, the Lake Pepin and Legacy Alliance, the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, the National Wildlife Federation, and the Mississippi River Network. And I believe we've got folks from all or almost all of these organizations on tonight, whether in St. Louis at the watch party or online. So that's really awesome to see. So in our committee, we're embracing a set of key principles to support how we're engaging people in all 10 river states and tribal nations in the way that we're pursuing MRRRI goals. And some of our key first steps include building knowledge and understanding. We're doing this by conducting research and literature reviews of environmental justice issues up and down the Mississippi River. We're working to establish, and actually already have established, a micro fundraising effort within MRRRI. This equity fund is something where we're asking the organizations that do have the extra capacity and resources to contribute a bit extra to support underrepresented organizations to have capacity to participate in the collaborative. We're working to widen the circle, and by this I mean that we're planning for soliciting wide, honest, and critical feedback from diverse and underrepresented groups in order to help further refine MRRRI messaging and materials, and then to work with our existing relationships to begin to reach people that we have not yet connected with. And if that's you or someone you know, then please reach out to us. Let us know. We want to bring you in. We're working to lift up all voices. And as MRRRI continues to be developed, we want to boost each other's efforts, elevate key issues and opportunities, and bring local efforts and organizations into the national platform. So that's a little bit of how we're working on these equity and justice issues internally as a collaborative of organizations promoting MRRRI. So you might want to know, how's MRRRI itself, the legislation, when it gets to happen on the ground, how is that going to work on equity and justice issues? As we learned earlier, MRRRI has 4 focused areas that it's going to fund actions and projects in. That's addressing clean water, river corridor habitat restoration, natural infrastructure, and trying to stop some aquatic invasive species from spreading further. And we're committed that in the funding of projects addressing these 4 different areas, that the funds will be directed equitably and with intention to communities that have faced disproportionate harms from environmental degradation and environmental racism. And we also know that restoration projects, like the projects that MRRRI hopes to fund, they create jobs, they help reinvigorate river communities. We know it's important to invest where investment will have the most impact. And that's not just for the environment, but also for our river communities. And so that's why MRRRI legislation will direct a percentage of overall annual funds to go to projects, outreach, and/or research that address the disproportionate effects of the river's ecological degradation. And that's in terms of the impacts on economically disadvantaged communities and communities of color. Further, a portion of MRRRI funds will be directed to persistent poverty counties in the 10-state river corridor. And persistent poverty counties are counties that for decades, 30 years, have had high rates of poverty. And currently, Congresswoman McCollum's legislation proposes that no less than 25% of these funds each year will be directed to address these effects in communities of color and economically disadvantaged communities. And then not less than 10% of funds will be directed to those persistent poverty counties. So that's a bit of how we're working on justice and equity issues, both internally with the MRRRI Collaborative and through the legislation itself. With that, I'm going to pass it back over to Matt to share more about who all's involved in the MRRRI Collaborative so far. Take it away, Matt.
Thanks, Alana. So who is involved in MRRRI so far? And the short answer is lots of people. Currently, and organizations, currently over 30 regional, state, local, and national organizations and entities are working together as the MRRRI Collaborative. We're sharing information, strategizing how to implement MRRRI, and engage with our respective communities as just like we are this evening. I'm not going to list all of the organizations in the collaborative, but I'm still going to give you a little bit of a list. I'm going to try to mention a few who play the key roles. The steering committee provides overall strategic leadership and guidance, and this includes American Rivers, Friends of the Mississippi River, Greenlands, Blue Waters, us at Healthy Gulf, the Mississippi River Network, the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, the National Wildlife Federation, and the Lower Ninth Ward Center for Sustainable Engagement and Development. We are in the process of adding additional organizations because we want to balance our geography, demographics, issue expertise, and organizational types and sizes. And we're led by a rotating co-chair system, and Whitney and I are the current co-chairs. And then after the steering committee, we have a campaign committee, and these are the folks that get the work done, or some of the folks that get the work done. They are focusing on our legislative strategy to help get MRRRI over the finish line in 2021. And the National Wildlife Federation leads on our legislative and policy strategies. The Friends of the Mississippi River leads on communications, and our host, the Mississippi River Network, focuses on organizing and outreach. So then we also benefit from the expertise and connections of 10 state lead organizations in each of the 10 main stem river states, the states that touch the Mississippi River proper. And these are the organizations that we invite each of you to reach out to and connect with to learn more about MRRRI and see how it's going to impact your state and how you can help, other than filling out the petition, which I assume everybody has done at this point. So as the river flows from top to bottom, our 10 MRRRI state leads are the Friends of the Mississippi River, Clean Wisconsin, Iowa Environmental Council, Illinois Environmental Council, Conservation Federation of Missouri, Kentucky Waterways Alliance, Tennessee Wildlife Federation, Arkansas Ducks Unlimited, the Mississippi Wildlife Federation, and then finally my organization in Louisiana, Healthy Gulf. As we've mentioned throughout the evening, our work is in the beginning stages to achieve this vision of a geographic program for the Mississippi River. And we're really looking forward to engaging you, all river enthusiasts nationwide, more and more in the weeks and months ahead. So for now, you can get involved and stay up to date on updates about MRRRI in a few different ways. One way is you can follow and sign up for alerts from your state lead organization, those ones that I just listed. You know, for example, if you live in Minnesota, visit FMR, that's Friends of the Mississippi River, fmr.org. You can sign up for their newsletters, become a river guardian with them. Or if you're down here in Louisiana, you can go to my organization, healthygulf.org, and sign up for our alerts. Or you can go to the horse's mouth too. You can sign up to become a river citizen through the Mississippi River Network's One Mississippi program. So you can visit onemississippi.org to learn more about that. And then if you're a little bit more of a wonk and you want to really get in the weeds and you have specific questions about the legislation or other areas around MRRRI, you can email info@onemississippi.org. That's the number 1, Mississippi.org, with the subject MRRRI comment, and MRRRI is with 3 R's, and we'll make sure that your question is answered. So I think that's it for me right now. So I'm going to kick it back over to Whitney to wrap up this presentation and share the next steps. So on to you, Whitney.
Great. Thank you, Matt. As we wrap up this portion of the program, I want to just take a couple of minutes to share where we are in our journey, the MRRRI journey, and what's coming up in the near term for MRRRI. Thanks in part to Congresswoman McCollum's leadership, legislation will begin moving through Congress that funds and authorizes the establishment of MRRRI in the very near future. After Congresswoman McCollum introduces her legislation, we'll be working with lawmakers in both chambers and both parties over the summer to move the bill forward. We do have an opportunity on the Senate side to get it into a bill that they'll be marking up later this summer that has other geographic programs in it. So it'd be a good fit, and we hope to be hitching a ride on that bill later this summer. Even after MRRRI becomes law, though, we're going to have work to do every single year to make sure that MRRRI is implemented in all of our river states, and that's really where the fun begins. So this is really just to say this is the beginning of a conversation that we hope to continue with all of you in the weeks and months and years to come. So thank you again for being here, for being part of this, for all that you already do to protect the Mississippi River and the communities that depend on it. And I'm going to turn it back over to Michael now to wrap up our program tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Whitney, Alana, and Matt. Such great information. Appreciate your presentations tonight. I hope everyone else, I'm sure everyone else that has joined this evening did as well. So what do y'all think? Do you support a new vision for our Mississippi River that focuses on restoration, resilience, and equity? If your answer is yes, we invite you to please sign the public petition. If you haven't already, by visiting this link, I'll go ahead and put it in the chat for access. And then of course, you can pull out your smartphone. You probably have it next to you. Open the camera, point it at the QR code, the logjam of black and white squares on your screen. Follow the link, sign the petition. I will mention you will have the option of including a comment when you sign the petition. And so if you do have a comment about what you've heard tonight about this new vision for the river, please feel free to include that as part of your signature. And so if you already signed the petition tonight, we all thank you deeply. My ask for you now is, can you think of one person or two people? Maybe you have an upcoming meeting with organizations and different community leaders and members where passing on this information would be very useful to help advance this new vision for the river. So that'd be the ask. Continue on, please. We'd love to help reach our goal of 5,000 signatures by the end of River Days of Action. And so if you have already signed the petition, we invite you to please share it with others in the river community who aren't here tonight. And just as a reminder, this event, this Mississippi River Nationwide Town Hall, kicks off the Mississippi River Network's River Days of Action, which is happening from June 10th to June 20th. There are about 45 events on the One Mississippi page that are in person and virtual from headwaters to Gulf and around the country. And Alana has just included the link into the chat. Thank you for that. But we just want to encourage everyone to stay involved this week for the next 10 days, attend as many events as you can, and then be sure to, share the information far and wide, and especially pass this petition on, right? The goal is 5,000 signatures by June 20th, all right? This is the kickoff. Let's see what we can do. So we do just have 2 to 3 minutes. If you have questions, just as a reminder, as Alana and Matt mentioned, please email info@onemississippi.org with the subject MRRRI comment, and we'll make sure your question is answered. And with that, that's going to conclude our event this evening. Thank you all for your effort, for your time, for showing up tonight for the river, for each other. Again, email info@onemississippi.org, subject MRRRI comment. If you have any questions, we'll make sure that reaches the folks that it needs to, so we can get your question addressed. And I'll just echo what Alana mentioned earlier. You have a seat at this table, right? You are part of this new vision for the river, and we need you. So it begins, of course, sharing this petition, becoming a river citizen, reaching out to your local state leads, a part of MRRRI, asking questions, being curious, and showing up. So with that, thank you all so much for your time and energy tonight. Please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists, Whitney, Matt, Alana, and the folks over in St. Louis at the watch party. Rebecca as well with the Healthy Golf. She has been driving our PowerPoint for the night. We could not have done this without her. So thank you all so much. We wish you a safe and healthy rest of your night and weekend. Take care.